Hey everyone, and welcome to the channel for another Escape from Tarkov video. This time with some more low-level, early wipe looting tips to show you some areas that'll be a goldmine for you to search in the early game for quest items, hideout components, and food to keep your character topped up on energy. These areas never really stop being worthwhile to check, but the reason that I suggest them for early wipe and low level is because they require no keys or anything special to access. You can just hit these areas up, loot, and scoot your way to extraction with a bag full of goodies. To give you a little variety, I'll be talking about at least one location on 5 out of the 7 maps that we currently have in the game. Only skipping labs because it isn't really an early game map, and factory because we haven't had a chance to really explore the new expansion and see what's good. I'll be talking about what you can expect to find in each of these areas, but I won't be going over each and every loot container and spawn, just to keep this guide to a nice short length and to encourage you to explore and find some of this stuff on your own. So with that intro out of the way, let's get started with some of the newest locations on this list in the expanded areas of the Woods map. First up for this video, we'll be taking a look at 2 spots that I highly recommend for early game looting on Woods, which you can hit up while you're doing the introduction quest for Jaeger, or while taking out scavs for proper shootout picnic quest. To start off, we'll look at the Emercom camp, which is located down in the southeast section of the Woods map, somewhat near the main lumber mill. This camp is kind of a gold mine for medical loot, technical loot, and food, all of which are useful to pick up pretty much at any level. This single location is packed with supply crates, med crates, weapon crates, and tons of loot just scattered around on tables and chairs for you to pick up. This is an awesome place to loot for Salawas for Therapist, beef stew and croutons for Jaeger's early quests, and basic supplies to keep your character topped up between raids or to upgrade your hideout. Keep in mind that a lot of scavs spawn here and other players will likely pass by, so be careful and get out of here quick when you're done looting. The other location on Woods that I recommend for easy hideout loot is the village up in the northeast corner of the map, pretty close to the old sawmill and the northern roadblock extraction. This area isn't quite as dense with loot as the Emercom camp, but each of these houses and little sheds have spawn points for lots of industrial loot for the hideout, food spawns in the kitchens, ammo spawns, and toolboxes, jackets, and bags. From here, if you head straight south, you can also reach the old sawmill, which has a few supply crates and some other loot worth picking up as well. This location is a spawn point too, so you can end up here right at the start of the raid and stuff some expensive loot into your container before you move on to explore the rest of the map. Just be careful because other players spawn kinda close by, so they might roll up on you. Next up, we'll take a look at customs and talk about why you should definitely be looting the new expanded construction areas whenever you're sent here for a quest. This area was the second new zone added to customs, and it really added a lot of spawns for loot that is going to be extremely useful to you while you're leveling up and upgrading your hideout. First up, we have what the community calls the crack house or the meth lab, a 2-story building with tons of good loot spawns packed into its few rooms. On the bottom floor, you got a bunch of med spawns, a potential treasure spawn in the dead scav's hands, a couple jackets, and a small guard post with ammo and food spawns. Upstairs is where the real attraction is though, with some intelligence folders spawning on the shelves of the library and more medical loot spawning in the other rooms on the top floor. This area is quite dangerous though, so be careful when you're coming in and out of this building. The next spot that you want to check is the fortress building close to the crack house, which is a very large shell of a building that contains a couple of wooden supply crates, several weapon crates, and other loose loot that spawns on the ground. Make sure that you check the 2 side rooms on the main level because they spawn a lot of stuff on the ground and on the shelves for you to pick up. This area is a scav boss spawn point though, so be really careful when you're approaching so you don't get blasted by Reshala. The final spot in this area that you should check is the other half-constructed building that you can see from the fortress, which also has a supply crate and several medical item spawns. Next, we're moving on to the reserve military base, which is a pretty great spot to check for loot that doesn't require keys, but it's also one of the more dangerous maps and one of the trickiest to extract from without special conditions. For this video, I'll be focusing on the large buildings in the helicopter courtyard area, which have some really top tier spawns that you are 100% going to want to check out if you ever come here for a loot run. First, we'll start with the white pawn building at the tail end of the chopper. In this one, you want to run up to the roof of the building and search the green tent for weapon parts and grenades, and then the green wooden crates for loose spawns of military tech items. There's also 1 bag and 3 jackets with a pretty good chance of key spawns up on this roof, which are always worth checking for some good keys. Next, I skip past the black pawn building because it doesn't really have much for you unless you have the keys to open the doors. Instead, I head across the courtyard to the black bishop building, where you want to run up to the top floor and check each of the 4 rooms in the main hallway for military items on the shelves or laying on the chairs or on the floor. After this, jump out the window in the room nearest to the sniper's nest on the top floor and go into the window off the little awning to find yourself in the drop down room. This spot can spawn really good tech items like graphics cards and Tetris if you're lucky. From here, you can jump out the window and head to the server building that'll be on your right hand side of the courtyard, marked by the king symbol. This building has a number of server rooms on the first floor that are all very much worth checking out, along with more technical spawns on the second floor and a few spawns for tools and gasoline on the third floor and the side rooms as well. Before you head out of the helicopter courtyard though, there's also a bunch of wooden supply crates scattered on and around the truck sitting in the courtyard. These can be really risky to loot, but they also can spawn some seriously valuable items as well, so that risk is up to you. You can also find 3 or 4 of these supply crates in the tunnels underneath this courtyard, which can be accessed from each of the buildings in the area, so those are worth checking out if it's safe and nobody is down in the ratacombs. Finally, my last recommendation for early game reserve loot is to hit up the 2 large garage buildings in the motor pool area, each marked with a knight symbol. These buildings have a ton of jackets and filing cabinets, as well as toolboxes just sitting out in the open, and they can be really helpful for finding your flash drives and gas analyzers early on. Moving on to the mall on the Interchange map, there's a whole bunch of really solid areas to check for loot that require no keys to access. You could honestly walk into pretty much any area of this map and find something worth picking up, but these areas I'm pointing out each have something specific that you'll need in the early game. First, we have the 3 large superstores, starting with the Oli store, colored bright green so it's easy to recognize. Oli is one of the absolute best places to search for hideout components early on, and all you really need to do is wander around the store checking all of the shelves carefully to find things. Mostly I come here for gas analyzers, car batteries, wires, helix coils, water filters, screws, bolts, and motors, and you rarely leave this store empty-handed. Next, right in the middle of the mall is the Goshan store, identified by the bright orange and red coloring on the shelves and the signs. This store isn't quite as good as Oli, but you can find weapon parts on some of the shelves, as well as food and water, but those seem like kind of rare spawns. The best part of this area is in the back loading bay, where you should check the shelves carefully for rare tools, as well as the numerous toolboxes and weapon crates that you can find in this area. Finally, the last superstore in the mall is Idea, identified by the bright blue and yellow color scheme. The highlight of this area is the large office towards the back of the store, which has a whole bunch of computers and technical spawns for things like gas analyzers, graphics cards, and Tetris on the desks and the back shelving area. You can also sometimes find statues on the bookshelves in the very back of this store, but it's pretty rare and you won't find these too often, so I wouldn't go out of my way too much to check them. The last spots that are really important to check whenever you're close by are the tech stores on Interchange, which are a goldmine of computer parts, wires, light bulbs, motors, gas analyzers, graphics cards, and so much other stuff. Check every shelf carefully in these areas when you visit them, and you'll often walk away pretty fat with loot. Starting from the top floor, we have Tech Light with the bright red sign, and tons of shelves inside that can all spawn tech items. Right down the escalator from here is the Techno store with the blue and pink shelves. You'll want to check all of these shelves on both sides for rare computer parts. Just down the hall from here is the Rasmussen store, and again, you'll want to check all of the shelves and behind the desk in the corner to find any rare items. From here, the last 2 stores are across the main central area of the mall interior, which is really dangerous, and I recommend you take a sneakier approach than just walking across the central area like I'm doing here. First, there's the German store, which can spawn tech items on the shelves and each of the small little stands that are sitting around the floor. Finally, just across the hall from here is the Mantis store, which has some technical spawns, but also a whole bunch of medical spawns that can be pretty helpful and spawn some rare items sometimes. Finally, to finish the video off, I have a personal favorite spot of mine in the early game to build up a good set of keys without having to spend any money: the village and the vacation cottages on the Shoreline map. The village has a whole ton of different loot scattered around the buildings, including quite a few toolboxes and duffel bags in the little garages and the wood sheds. The real attraction for me though is that each house has 1 or more jackets, which each have a chance to spawn keys, which then allow you to loot more valuable areas in future runs. There's a total of like 17 or more jackets in this area, but they're spread out among all of the houses and stores, so you'll need to explore a bit to find them all. In my experience though, a few runs to the village here will net you some decent keys that can be sold or kept to do future loot runs. Just down the road from the village are the 2 cottages, and you want to check these as well because both of them have a couple of safes which can spawn valuable items, and some computers and jackets, as well as a rare key spawn in the back entrance. The second cottage is locked, but when you come here, just be sure to check the blue water barrels outside in the yard, which have a pretty decent chance to spawn the key that you need. Finally, there's also 7 hidden stash locations just in this little village area, and I'm going to quickly let a few clips roll that'll show you the location of each of these stashes. They're most definitely worth looting and can sometimes make you millions in a single run. Well, that covers it for this quick guide on some of the best areas to search for loot in the early game, when you don't have any keys to unlock high value loot areas. Each of these spots is still very much worth looting even at higher levels, but they're especially useful when you're just starting out to build a nice surplus of supplies and money. Hopefully this guide helps you out as you're starting fresh after the wipe, or if you just joined Tarkov and are starting a new character. In any case, let me know what you think down in the comments, and tell me about your favorite spots to loot in the early game. Thanks for checking out the video. I've got links to my Twitch stream, Discord server, and Patreon page down below for anyone interested. And until next time, stay safe in Tarkov City.